Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is in the news talking about pipelines again. A couple of weeks ago, she floated reviving the Northern Gateway project, only having it terminate at Prince Rupert instead of Kitimat, and it'd be 1 million barrels instead of 500,000 barrels. And apparently yesterday now she's asking for multiple pipelines. Well, I have a different take on this. I think Canada should ask itself, are we in the business of building pipelines, or are we in the business of getting oil to market? Because oil can be transported to market. It doesn't have to be in a pipeline. Let me give you an example. We did a video a couple of weeks ago about a process called DRUBIT, Diluent Recovery Unit BIT, where basically heavy crude oil that has 30% diluent in it, lighter hydrocarbon, you take the diluent out, or most of it, and then you put it in specially heated cars and you rail it to a port. And then so you could rail it to the Prince Rupert port, or Vancouver, or maybe even Churchill in northern Manitoba, if they make some changes to the rail line there. There are other things you could do with it. Maybe what you do is make advanced materials out of it. I mean, Alberta Innovates is a little ways away, in a year or two maybe, from having a process to turn bitumen into carbon fiber. Doesn't have to be carbon fiber. You can put it in, you can do a lower grade carbon fiber and put it in building materials like cement. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. Make asphalt binder for making roads. You can turn it into activated carbon for batteries. And those are just the things they've been researching. There's other opportunities. And that would create a domestic market. Instead of pipelining it someplace into the United States or international markets, you actually do something with it at home. So we need to have a different kind of conversation, and don't expect industry to lead. That's one thing and really, to understand where Danielle Smith is coming from, she is speaking for industry. Everything that comes out of her mouth, every position that she advances, is basically reflects what industry is calling for. Okay, so industry doesn't always get what it wants. I mean, there are reasons for this. You build a pipeline from Edmonton to Prince Rupert or to Kitimat, you're basically building the pipeline through part of Canada where the people who bear the risk of let's say a pipeline rupture and an oil spill, don't get any of the benefit. They bear all the risk, they get none of the benefit. The benefit accrues to Alberta. I mean, you can see why they might not be happy about that. And so that's one thing. The second thing is that the resource is not owned by the companies. According to the Canadian Constitution, the resource is owned by the people of Alberta. Now, that's also true in Newfoundland and Saskatchewan, where they have oil as well. But I mean, Alberta's the big player here. So the people should have a say in how their resource is used and how it gets to market, and what if it gets made into something else, or if it just gets sold to refineries and petrochemical plants. So here's another thing. I want to get back to this issue of industry innovating. I spent 5 years in the oil and gas industry, and from 2003 to 2008, just before we started Energi Media. And all day, every day, I had to talk to engineers all over North America. West Texas, Houston, Oklahoma, New Mexico, California, Alberta, sometimes in Saskatchewan. And after talking to hundreds of engineers over 5 years, what I learned is they're very, very good at what they do. They're brilliant at solving problems, at innovating inside the box. But they're also incredibly risk averse. Once they have a solution that works, it may not be the perfect solution, but they're familiar with it, it's economic, they can make money at it, and they don't have to worry about it failing. And that's a big deal because there are consequences. So if a well fails, for example, it might cost you $250,000, maybe $1 million to take that well off production and then rework it and get a rig on it and all of those kinds of things. So once they've got a solution, it's very hard to get them off it. And the problem here is that, the pipelines are, as they say, they're the safest way to transport oil. They're the cheapest way to transport oil to market. All of that is true. But during a time of intense change in the global energy system, where there are people like, OPEC is forecasting oil demand to increase quite a bit out to 2050. But the International Energy Agency and lots of other forecasters are saying no, peak oil demand in 2030 and then a decline. Given the level of uncertainty involved here, why are we in Canada sticking to the same old solutions that we've been using for 70 or 80 years? Maybe it's time to think about not what worked in 1953 when we built the first big pipeline, but is there a clever way to do this that reduces risk, and maybe it costs a little bit more, admittedly, like for instance, if you're railing Drew Bit out to Prince Rupert, it's going to cost you a couple bucks more per barrel than if you build a pipeline. But you don't risk having a stranded asset that, that the people of Canada might wind up having to not only pay part of it or all of it, but also might have to pay to clean up that stranded asset. So all I'm asking for is that we expand the options that we have in our public discussion about the future of oil, how we get Canadian oil to market, where we're going to sell it. Nobody still has asked, are there customers in Asia and Europe that will actually buy the oil? And there's lots of evidence that maybe for instance, Alberta heavy crude is not competitive in China and India, just as an example. Why do we have the same old conversations over and over and over again? Why can't we try to be clever, try to do something that's less risky, take a strategic approach to things instead of just, we've got a hammer, we have to go and hit a nail. It's time that we had a different conversation in Canada about oil, what the future is, and how we're going to get it to market.